Pessimism is a kind of anchoring. By anchoring, what I mean is familiarity. I mean something you can rely on, something you can attach yourself to, something which is regular, something which is normal, something which is predictable, something which is going to happen. And therefore, in a sense, you are in control. You have a sense of being in control because you know you can count on this, that, and the other, A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. It's going to happen. It's there for you. Good or bad, it's there for you. Family is a kind of anchoring. You hate your parents, you hate your annoying siblings, your cousins, your aunts, and your uncles. You disagree, you get in fights, but it's a form of anchoring. It anchors you to reality. It makes you feel, in some senses, in control. Even where it takes away your freedom, it gives you a sense of control. That's paradoxical, but this is a kind of non-dualistic view of personality and environment. But it's an enframing. It's a way that, oh, I can't be out after midnight because my family's going to be upset, and therefore that anchors me to reality. Therefore, I have something that restrains me, restricts me. It's like in a video game, you know the rules. There's nothing more frustrating than playing a game where you don't understand the rules. And there's nothing more frustrating than living a life where you don't understand the rules, the goal, the objective. What's the meaning? What's the purpose? That's why we like video games, because they're very often clear-cut what they are about. Now, of course, there's a spectrum of that ranging from the Minecraft, where it's kind of open-ended, an adventure game, Skyrim, open worlds. So this concept can be toyed with, it can be played with, and people can explore it in different ways. It's not necessarily black and white where it has to be Pac-Man or Pong or Mario or something very simplistic. We can expand on the concept, we can invert it, play with it, turn it upside down, turn the classroom around, right? We can have opposite day and play a reverso card. But video games are fun because they have defined rules and parameters, and that's kind of what I mean by anchoring. And, the other word is logos, language, syntax. Language is nothing more than rules, and there might be infinite so-called mathematical combinations of different words that we can say to produce different meanings, but ultimately language is constrained by rules, and it's created out of rules. It can't exist without rules. And we can't really conceive of anything or have any kind of attachment or perception of reality unless we have a preconditioned prejudice about the rules of how reality is going to go. If we have no model of the universe outside of ourselves, and we have no way to identify things linguistically, visually, geometrically, if we don't have rules in place experientially, prior to experience, if we don't have a priori rules in place, models, Platonism about what is out there, preconceived notions about what is this and what is that, abstractly, ideologically, and also physically. When we feel something, we interpret that data based off preconceived notions. And we create new models based off combinations or inversions of old models. So it is maybe a kind of a rhizomatic consciousness in the way that it grows outward from central principles and central precepts where, there is no center necessarily to our consciousness, but it's all sort of building off each other. And maybe I'm just throwing that in there to prove to you that, no, I have not read Deleuze. And he's not at the top of my reading list, if I had a reading list. But all of this is to say that rules, anchoring, logos, like we can take all of these words and create parallels and create, what's the other word? Not a simile, not a metaphor. Synonym is what I'm looking for. Same name, that all of these concepts sort of orbit around some maybe central, deeper concept of anchoring, of centrality, of this is important, this is what regulates my day, my consciousness, my identity, who I am, anchors me to the real world. And thus, for good or bad, for better or worse, I am a person with a personality, with a goal, objective, with habits, with predictability. I am a certain person who does certain things. And I might have degrees of freedom within that, but those are not infinite degrees of freedom. Those are limited by things like family, things like tradition, things like culture, things like collectivism, things like ideology. There are so many things that can limit us and constrain us, whether it's a video game, whether it's real life, whether it's an internet persona, whether it's you and me actually talking on the street, hugging each other, punching each other in the face, intimately, physical contact. Whatever the interaction is, to be anchored in reality and to be attached to reality and to engage with reality positively, constructively, whether it's an optimistic or a pessimistic outlook, there has to be some anchoring. And the more and more you chip away at that, and the more and more you deconstruct that, and the more and more you divest and detach from anchoring in general, whether it's your family, your friends, your job, your career, your location, your physicality, your mentality, whatever we're talking about, whenever we talk about anchoring, all the words I've used, regularity, go back, you can, rather than repeat myself, you can rewatch the intro to the video until you get it. And where does this leave us? What happens when we deconstruct our anchoring? Well, then we sort of, I don't want to say we lose ourselves, because that's almost too cliche. That's almost was Eminem. Is he the guy who says lose yourself? Mom's spaghetti, something like that. We know Eminem, good guy. So lose yourself. I mean, that's a phrase that we can use. But you sort of become inert. You sort of become sterile. You sort of become formless. You kind of become like an object rather than a subject. You sort of become a plant or a flower in a classical, Renaissance picture, or whatever you would call it. Still life is the word. I don't even think the still life is necessarily, particular to the Renaissance. I think it also was important after the Renaissance. But in any case, the still life, you kind of become a still life. You have no more dynamic, because you're not headed in any direction. You're kind of motionless, you're stationary, because every thought that comes to you is no different from any other thought. You have no frame of reference with which to judge that thought. You have no standard of what is normal from which to judge anything which is aberrant or that which is deviant. And so everything becomes completely flat. Everything becomes completely equal. This is no different from that. He is no different from she. Which is a very interesting, when we do have Paul make that statement in the Bible, is he talking about Buddhism? Is he saying that Christ is actually Buddhist meditation? And if you do enough Buddhist meditation, eventually you start to look at these concepts of man and woman and all, slave and master, these different kind of concepts. Do they all just become equal to you because you're so detached as a Buddhist enlightened master? Is that what was Paul really a covert Buddhist? Was he a secret Buddhist? Or did he come from India? Was he sent by the Buddha himself? Was he a disciple of Buddha, sent to Judea in order to convert everyone to Buddhism under the guise of Christianity? Was Jesus a disciple of Buddha? I know that the timeline is probably wonky on that one. I know we're probably getting our chronology. Probably history is getting a little messed up there. But, that's a way to look at it, right? Buddhism, as its anchoring, has these mantras and it has this meditation, this focus on emptiness itself. The idea is to get rid of your anchoring so that you can get in this pure state where it's like an ultimate Stoic Epicurean dream where nothing really matters and that's okay. And you have